So everyone, thanks for coming out tonight. Before we get started, quick note, we are recording the session. We're actually streaming it online on YouTube at the moment. We're also recording an HD version for later editing and later uploads. So if you do not want to appear on the recording, just don't talk, and you'll be covered. So that being said, my name is Dimitri Arapetov. I'm one of the 3 founders and hosts of this user group. We also have David Losey and Mike Dixon, which are all playing different roles today as we go through this. This is also our first time doing a live video stream. We have done live screen sharing streams before. Now we're adding a video element to it, so we're not exactly sure how well it's going to come out, but first time for everything, right? So for those of you that were able to join us last time, Mike Dixon did a great presentation on the evolution of Microsoft Teams. We have a recording of that as well that we'll be publishing soon. So check that out if you're interested in learning more. So as we typically do, we'll go ahead and talk a little bit about what has changed in the world of Office 365 since we last met. Now there's a million things that change on a weekly basis. We can't cover all of them. We would need to be here all night. But we pick a few of the key highlights and kind of bring them up just to keep everyone aware of what's happening. So the first thing is Gartner recently published a report highlighting Microsoft's vision for communications going forward. They talk a lot about Microsoft Teams, the direction of that Skype for Business is going, and providing their perspective on it. It's a complimentary report. If you're in that space, definitely check it out. It was good to see a third party give their independent analysis of Microsoft's vision. So along the same lines, Forrester has recently released their Wave for the leaders in enterprise file sync and share. And Microsoft has been rated the highest it has ever been rated against its peers in the space, which just shows that Microsoft continues to invest in the technology, and they're caught up in making a lot of ground on a lot of the competition. Next is there's a new preview out called Microsoft Whiteboard. Just curious, has anyone heard about this or played with it yet? Okay, a few people in the room. So this is an additional service that Microsoft is adding to Office 365 as the portfolio continues to grow. This is essentially a really nice whiteboarding virtual session that you can join in and do a lot of collaboration there. Personally, I love to whiteboard. I have a whiteboard in my home office. I like to go out, draw diagrams, get everybody on the same page. This will hopefully make it easier to do that when we can't be in the same room at the same time.
Right. Is that a part of the? Is that a part of Teams?
So it is currently in preview.
Okay.
Right now it's in preview as an item, but chances are it'll be following the footsteps of Planner, of being integrated with groups and Microsoft Teams and all the other jazz. I'm not sure how much has been publicly released, so check out that article. You'll learn a little bit more there. And next is there's a new video help available for Office. We have a lot of clients that come to us when they do move to Office 365 or they upgrade to Office 2016, wondering, is there some training available? How do we figure out how to do things with the new interface? How do we take advantage of some of the new functionality? So Microsoft has actually added a number of different training tutorials directly inside of the Office applications. You just go into that top left bar where you can ask for help, and it'll show you relevant videos. So neat addition there. Next is that Microsoft, or not Microsoft, but I guess Microsoft in this scenario, has taken all of the videos that they recorded at Ignite, which includes all of the sessions along with the slide decks and everything else, and they've published it for free on MyIgnite. So if you're interested in recapping, or if you didn't have a chance to attend and you wanted to see what was talked about, take a look there. There's a few MVPs that also released a PowerShell script that will go ahead and download all of these to your computer. So if you have a little bit over a terabyte of space, it could be a great download. So that being said, I would like to pass the mic over to our sponsor for tonight. SkySync was able to come in here and sponsor our group. We'll talk a little more about sponsorship later on in the session. But for now, I'm going to hand over to Brad.
Awesome. Thank you, Dimitri. Appreciate it. See some familiar faces out there. For those of you that I've never met before, my name is Brad Chase. I live here in Boston, and as Dimitri mentioned, work for an organization called SkySync. A little background on myself. I've been in the Microsoft ecosystem for the better part of 10 years, formerly working for an organization called Metalogix, and prior to that, an organization called Acceler. So I was with those both those software companies for the better part of 8 years, specializing in SharePoint and Office 365 optimization. And I actually joined SkySync about 2.5 months ago. So relatively new, but again, fairly common ground for my experience. Show of hands, who's heard of SkySync?
Other than the last half hour.
All right, fair enough. Well played. Has anybody used SkySync? All right, nice. We got one. As a high-level overview, SkySync is a Microsoft-managed ISV specializing in enterprise content integration. So we essentially help organizations with large-scale, complex hybrid integration initiatives or migration initiatives when it comes to consolidating or integrating disparate systems with cloud services like Office 365. I'll keep this very high level. A lot of the organizations we work with today, and I'm sure for those of you that are out there managing content and collaboration platforms know it's very fragmented and very siloed when it comes to the number of platforms that are being leveraged to store and manage content. Going back way back when, we had file systems and email as the main system for collaboration, which graduated into electronic data management systems, process structure, more deliverables, graduated and evolved into enterprise content management. And then really over the past, say, 4 or 5 years, we've seen the prevalence of enterprise file sync and share, right? A new and kind of easier way for organizations and individuals to share content. There's not feature parity. An EFSS platform typically can't be something that's going to replace an ECM platform like a Documentum. And what we've seen over the years is organizations have developed these business critical silos of content with EFSS. With EFSS, sometimes even platforms that, is that what I sound like? Platforms that aren't even IT sanctioned, right? So ungoverned silos of content. And really, we're at an interesting spot right now in my eyes, and based off of the conversations and the opportunities that I've been engaged with. EFSS was this new Gartner Magic Quadrant in 2013, which has since this year been renamed to CCP. Obviously, Forrester still leveraging the EFSS verbiage. This year, the term ECM was buried by AIM in March, right? And really, in my eyes, EFSS, ECM has really evolved into this content collaboration platform with solutions such as Office 365 that actually can provide feature parity and support and mobile accessibility across the board. So you have this paradigm where, 87% of organizations still have legacy systems out there. In fact, over 50% have 3 or more. By 2020, Gartner says that 90% of organizations will be leveraging 1 or more cloud content collaboration platform. So a lot of the organizations that we're working with are trying to figure out, what to do with these legacy systems. You have a situation where OpenText just acquired Documentum, 2 fairly overlapping technologies now managed by one vendor, and not a lot of investment is really being seen in that realm. So that's where we come into play. We allow organizations to easily consolidate or integrate any number of platforms. So out of the box, we support over 45 different platforms, a lot of which I mentioned earlier. So Lotus Notes, Documentum, Alfresco, OpenText, all the cloud service providers like Box, Dropbox, Google, the Office 365 suite. And we provide a very efficient and seamless way to migrate or integrate these platforms in full fidelity. 30 terabytes a day, I guess for those out there, who's done a cloud migration before? So, as you know, one of the biggest challenges is throughput, right? Avoiding getting throttled, speeds and fees based off of network latency and API calls and any number of external variables. Our solution's built in the cloud-first era and built to support these migrations and to really overcome that hurdle. 30 terabytes a day is something that we've experienced in production migrations on multiple initiatives. We've actually seen higher than that in certain spikes, but we can say reliably that we can deliver on a 30 terabyte per day migration scope in a lot of initiatives. There's a lot of migration vendors out there. I actually used to work for 2 of them. And a big difference that we provide around capabilities around integration is just moving content from one platform to the other, but actually integrating the 2 platforms. So we have organizations that are integrating a platform like Documentum with a SharePoint, where Documentum is the source of record, and they plan on inevitably retiring Documentum and replacing it with SharePoint, but that's not a simple decision to make or a simple migration to execute on. So they leverage a synchronization element for what we call like a crawl, walk, run type migration scenario. And lastly, excuse me, there's zero impact on users based off the architecture of the solution. So all of this is going on behind the scenes, unbeknownst to the end user community, meaning that everybody's happy and performance is good, while meanwhile, the IT community or the centralized shared services group can really execute on what they're trying to execute on and consolidate these platforms to improve productivity, lower annual IT spend, and ultimately make sure that you guys are remaining compliant and content's retained. So that's all I got in a nutshell. Again, it's pretty quick. Question?
One question, if I've got hyperlinks embedded in a document that point to other documents currently in OpenText or wherever, what happens to those hyperlinks?
Most likely it's going to be a challenge around retaining the actual access to the new location. Scripting is potentially something that we could look at, but I wouldn't be able to say with confidence that's something that we could, with a flip of a switch, support for you. However, I'm honestly not the person that would be able to give you the full answer to that question, at least not yet.
How does it cope with maintaining metadata? A good example of this is like a file share migration where a lot of people sort by the date created. You want to migrate that into the cloud. Can you try and maintain that kind of metadata moving across?
Yep, so like author preservation and the historical metadata is all maintained. The product's very refined when it comes to user mapping and permissions mapping and security mapping. And even when it comes to like integration, if you have like a bidirectional integration element, there's automated rules and policies in place around remediation in case somebody saves the same file on 2 different systems at the same time. What do you do there? So that's all built into the technology. Any other questions?
Is it a sync tool or a migration tool?
Whatever you want, either. Seriously.
Yeah.
Yes. For a migration. So it can maintain, like, if I have 2 separate SharePoint environments of 2 separate networks, I could keep them in sync, like 2 different HR directories and things.
Without getting into like the nitty gritty in terms of how they're communicating or what versions they are, I can say most likely yes. There's always going to be a caveat, right? Like when it comes down to the fidelity of the migrations or the integrations, like I can't go out and say that you're going to get the same thing from a SharePoint to or say like a file shared Office 365 as like a documented to an OpenText. There's always going to be very specific limitations or considerations when it comes to each of those. But generically, yes, we can do that out of the box. And then, when it comes to like scripting and coding, that obviously enables a lot more.
So is your niche like an overlap time, like when people are migrating and there's a time to keep both systems alive?
Yeah, so that's one of the, so when it comes to the integration element, yeah, that's a popular use case where you have, say somebody wants to move to OneDrive and they're a Box customer, right? And everybody's comfortable with Box, but Microsoft's done a good job, selling Office 365 and deploying the platform and helping them understand the savings. And this is a common migration use case. I'd say that probably 65-70% of the opportunities that we were engaged with this year were Microsoft replacing other cloud service providers like Box. What you can do in that situation is have an integration for a period of time where you say, hey, we're rolling out OneDrive. It's new, it's different. It's going to do all the same stuff. You just got to get used to the interface a little bit. And you have that synchronization integration going on, and your first wave of users go over, the early adopters, the people that want to embrace the platform. There's always going to be the middle ground people in the laggards that just don't want to move over, right? And you're going to have to provide training and enablement and help them understand that. Well, with our platform, you can enable that by having that integration in place. So whenever they are ready, and I recommend having some sort of hard date you're working towards, whenever they're ready to go, their content's going to be in sync with what it was at where it was at with Box from a versioning perspective and all that good stuff. So that's definitely a popular use case for the synchronization element. And then so that's one of our niches. And then the other niche is just like the wide platform support. So we work very closely with the Microsoft Modern Workplace team when it comes to going into these organizations and helping them with these digital transformations when they have 3, 4, 5, 6 different technologies that they're trying to get into one platform. Having one partner, kind of one throat to choke, and one interface to use as part of that integration is pretty helpful as well in terms of just cutting costs. Any other questions? Well, I appreciate the time. I hope everybody has a great holiday, and I guess now we're on to the main event. All right, thank you.
All right. So if we could have our panelists please come to the front.
Oh, I get to sit next to Chris.
Sir?
Why do I have to sit?
You're welcome.
Uh,
So I can defer to you.
I was gonna say something not as nice,
Oh.
but yes, to defer to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the reason.
Why are there more of us up here than there are back there?
That's a great question.
Is that the first question?
Oh, we're not
Yes.
asking the question?
No.
All right, so,
I thought they were gonna answer.
so a couple of things, when we get started, if you hear a question, we ask that you repeat the question before you answer it, that way the microphone's set up in front of you, can capture that correctly. And second of all, it would be great if we could start with a quick introduction, so Chris, if you could start and work our way down.
Sure. Hi, my name is Chris Bolduc. I'm an architect at the Microsoft Technology Center upstairs, focused on Office 365 and our security tools. And that's it.
Hi, I'm Julie Turner. I am a principal architect with some Praxis Consulting. We're local to the Boston area, and I've been working on SharePoint since the 2007 version.
I'm Mark Anderson. I do SharePoint stuff. I'm old, I guess, so I get to sit up here because I'm old. I don't know. I'm not sure why I'm up here.
Lifetime Achievement Award.
It is an achievement. Looking forward to your questions, so it'll be fun.
I'm Jared Afkus. I'm the practice area lead for Slalom Consulting in Hartford. And I do O365 stuff, so I'm evolving. So SharePoint, I'm doing O365. I've got more questions than answers, so that'll be fun.
My name's Mike Dixon. I'm a senior architect for Wellington Street Consulting, and we are solely focused on Office 365 with over 20 years IT experience.
Hi.
Okay.
All right, so that puts it on you guys. Right?
Okay.
I'm done.
So now you have to introduce yourselves now.
So who has the first question?
Anyone?
Well, in the future releases, where the future direction of Office 365, what are you really looking forward to seeing coming out in the very near future?
Forward to coming out in the very near future.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to the SharePoint framework having the graph calls without having to authenticate, the ability to do graph calls without having to authenticate. So it would be all built in, which it should be, because it doesn't make sense if you're inside SharePoint running a SharePoint framework web part, why you would have to then re-authenticate to get a token to do graph calls. So I'm excited about that. And that you can extend it to your own applications too. So you can authenticate from SharePoint framework out to your own applications that were registered in the Azure Active Directory. So either one without actually having to make those round trip calls. So that's my thing.
I'm looking forward to parity of systems on the Skype for Business, Teams, and Groups front to kind of unify all of the settings and feature sets of all of those. Right now, it's something that a lot of my customers are very excited about, and it's something that I'm working with every day, but it's a little messy as to where the settings are kind of spread out, and the nomenclature is also relatively confusing right now. So I look forward to that being cleaned up, and it should be within, it's all on the roadmap for this upcoming year. So I'm really excited about that.
I think the new way that Microsoft is thinking about content services as opposed to enterprise content management is actually pretty cool. I've started playing around with labels and some of the security and compliance stuff. I could care less about records management unless a client of mine cares about it. But what I see happening there might be the Uber information architecture potential. Right now, we don't really have a very good content type or information architecture syndication story across modern sites. And I think the content services effort is going to bring some thinking to that. I don't know how long it's going to take, that's the problem, but I'm hoping that it all comes together, because right now we're going from, the sort of pyramid of subsites to a very flat topology with very few information architecture tools across it. and that content services thrust is, I think, where the solutions are going to come from.
I'm looking forward to marketing changing the name of either teams or groups at some point next year. I think that's going to be fun.
Wait until we actually understand them, and then
Then they'll
do it.
change them again.
Yeah.
Actually, in seriousness, my current client, seeing more feature parity between classic SharePoint and the modern sites, things like the content search web art, or just all those little things you take for granted, having them all there would be nice, because since modern is the new classic, I guess, it becomes tough, and you're like, I want to do this, but it's not there, and then I need to figure out how do I get back. It's kind of tough to evangelize when it's not there. It's kind of, fortunately, it feels like that's the new Microsoft. The new functionality comes out right away. It doesn't it's not fully baked. It's still minimal viable product concept, and it just doesn't always work in organizations that are trying to adopt it, because they'll come up with those little loopholes for why it won't work.
Are you guys seeing more people starting in modern now or moving to modern than a year ago?
Yes, I'm seeing definitely a lot more modern, but then the wait a second, where is something? And just it kind of slows you down if you're trying to do customizations. Like, I mean, for the past 2 years, I've been doing nothing but search web parts, and all of a sudden you hit modern, you're like, oh, what's the right
Well, at least
thing
they
here?
finally got the parity with the SharePoint framework stuff. I mean, at least you can do everything you need in the SharePoint framework.
Great for developers.
Yeah, so
For developers.
great story for developers,
Yeah.
not so great for configurers.
Yeah.
So
Or
my
users.
last 2 clients are both just starting all in on modern.
Yeah.
The last 2, so it's very exciting.
So for me, having been doing our cloud for about 6 years since the BPOS days, it's some of the things you guys already hit on. It's the integration and rationalization of some of the things we built. Wasn't easy, as you can imagine, to take on-premises server products that were isolated and siloed and move them to the cloud. And now that they're there, rationalizing Skype for Business and Teams into one product, which will happen over the next 12 to 18 months. Rationalizing Azure Information Protection with advanced data governance and labeling in Office 365 into one consistent set of policies for labeling and classification and retention, and then something new around hub sites, which, as we make the world more flat with these site collections, having the ability to more consistently brand and link them, so making search easier, making it easier for the user experience, because it is a big shift going from all of these sub-sites to this flat world of modern team sites and comm sites, and hopefully hub sites will fix some of those problems and won't be perfect in V1, but it'll be better than what we have right now.
Yeah.
So what's your recommendation? Like, I'm in the government tenant, and, so it'll be a while for Teams and 365 groups. There'll be a deadline on them, but when moving all these sites, should we not do sub-sites or try to stick to 2 layers? Or just what's the architectural planning? I get a lot of layers of content, and I'm going from on-prem.
I can tell you what Shire's doing.
Yep.
That's the plan. So if you haven't heard, there's Shire Pharmaceuticals here in Lexington is doing a huge migration. They're combining SharePoint 2010, a SharePoint 2013, 2 SharePoint 2007, and 1 other Office 365 tenant all into one Office 365 tenant. There's about 20,000 sites and subsites, and subsites, and subsites, and subsites, and sometimes subsites. And so the whole plan there is to sort of categorize all of that, but everything will go flat. So it's the idea of looking at all these, taking a site collection, deciding what's inside of it, should it all be together? If it is, putting it all in one site collection, or maybe some little sub bits of that go out into their own site collections, but the plan there is to flatten. But without the hub sites, it's that whole, if you've got the money and you can build an interim step, you build an interim step, and that's kind of what they're doing. If you don't, I don't know. I don't know that what you can do really, other than customization. Until hub sites come to fruition, which isn't far, right? I mean, I don't know what the date is. First half of the year.
I think this is public. First half of the next
2 years.
calendar year.
Yeah.
2 years in the government cloud, you'll be fine.
Yeah, Phil, he's in government cloud.
Oh, government cloud's a bit
yeah.
longer, yeah.
Yeah.
But I worry that, I think what Shire's doing is really cool, but they've said, we're going to live on the bleeding edge.
Oh,
That's an
absolutely.
intention.
Yeah.
I worry that this whole shifting from what I keep thinking of as a pyramid to this flat topology is the technology dictating how we think about our work. To me, that's absolutely backwards.
Yeah.
So taking 20,000 of anything and pouring them all into one big bucket with no sort of relationships between them that's insane to me. So in a sense, you're lucky that you can't. And it'll be a while before you can do this stuff, because hopefully by then, hub sites, I think, are an interesting start, but they're only going to help with these little tops of pyramids. They're not going to help with the rest of it. So I think you'll have to watch and see what happens. I wouldn't worry too much about creating subsites the way you have been in the meantime, because if it works for you and your folks are able to get work done, then that's actually the point. And worry about what you have to migrate to when you actually have the opportunity to migrate to, and a good reason to do it. Because there's nothing to keep you from running classic sites today.
It's not like they turned them off.
Right.
Yeah, and we didn't shut off subsites. I mean, there's a switch, you can turn them off if you want to, but most people, I would assume, are not gonna take advantage of that.
I think I would say think about it though. I don't know that I probably shouldn't be acting like I'm an information architect when I'm a developer, but I'm gonna do it anyway because I'm sitting here.
You hang out with Sue, yeah, cool.
Oh, I do hang out with Sue. Okay, I'll put my Sue hat on. I just don't know that I would go as deep as maybe we used to. Do you know what I mean? Like I agree with Mark at that level that that there's, if it works and there's a good reason to do it, but I think that nesting and nesting and nesting, I mean, I was joking about it, but we have one with 16 levels, a site collection with 16 levels that go down. That's like, nobody's gonna find that.
It's not that unusual though.
It's not, but I think if you're gonna think about it and be prescriptive about what you're doing, maybe you really question why you'd have to go past 2 or 3. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
if you're starting something new, if you create a new site collection and you're thinking about, well, where do we go from here in this site collection? You know things now that you wouldn't have known 2 or 3 years ago. So you probably won't end up with 16 subsites deep. But at some point, you're going to have to redo it.
Try to stay with smaller departments as centers in an organization, try not to cross centers or something, because later the hub sites are coming. Later the groups are coming.
Well, and to that point, I would just add that one of the features that I would love to see added is, rather than the subsites enablement being an on-off switch, I'd love to see that as a depth gauge.
I would love that.
So turn it on, but only allow 3D.
Yeah.
Hold it off there.
You know what I think is going to happen.
And even that, being able to vary that from collection to collection would be great.
What I think is going to end up happening is,
for it.
at some point, they're going to make it possible to have a hub site have its own parent hub site. In which case, we all have subsites again.
Right.
So it'll just be a different mechanism to do the same thing, because that's actually the way people think about the structure of their work. It's the way organizations are structured. So
The good thing with this, I mean, I don't disagree. The hub sites aren't going to be perfect, but at least it's a bit of a logical linking. The challenge I always had with multiple subsites is when you want to reorg the content, you can't easily break that site collection boundary to move things around. So if you reorg the department or you're buying a company, then you're trying to move content and you're breaking links and all the embedding. So a lot of our more modern experiences, where teams and groups and modern sites are all being built with the assumption that it's a top level site. But again, it's not without changing behavior and the way we've done things for the last 15 years.
Yeah. But if you get to what he's talking about, where it's the hub sites have hub sites, at least now when you have a structural reorg, if this comes to the top, you just relink it. And that is a much better story than the story we kind of have now with subsites. So
it's pointers,
Tactically too, just thinking some former migrations, doesn't hurt to sometimes just have document libraries with unique permissions versus whole site collections or whole subsites, or a couple of pages that are set up a little bit different. It's not everything requires a full container, maybe just a document library.
The question over here, can teams be auto-provisioned, including the tabs?
Not yet, but we're working on it.
Is there anything on the roadmap? Do we have a ETA?
I would check user voice for the latest on it, but I know that comes up a lot, is the ability to provision teams, to have the ability to provision channels with teams. Basically, templates for teams is the common ask is, I want to build this team, when I stamp it out, I have these 3 channels, and these channels have these items pinned as tabs and what have you. We did just release PowerShell commands for teams that are limited and basic right now. So there's some basic automation. It's not, again, everything, but the goal is to have essentially templating for Teams, where you can start to stamp out, whether it's through a template you build or through the APIs, to start to provision Teams with consistent channels and tabs and all that.
Is the MSA guest access for Teams ready for?
So the non-org ID one? Yeah, I mean, because today
Right,
you can
that
you can invite org IDs, which are the Azure AD accounts.
Yeah.
I don't think the consumer accounts are there yet. I know it's something that's been asked for as well.
So I can speak to that because I'm working with a client on that right now, and they are not.
Yeah.
So what we're working on to implement that for our external teams is we're using Teams as the front end mechanism for provisioning the site collection, and then we're inviting the external users into the SharePoint layer.
Yeah.
So you can go into the SharePoint layer
Yeah.
and do that. There is some extra little fun tricks that you have to do to make that happen, but it can be done.
Actually, that sounds very similar. I think the great one, Christian Buckley, that's his workaround.
Yep.
Conversation and content.
Is this the year you're going to fix the 2 different account types?
Me personally, yeah.
Can you have it done by like February? That'd be all right?
Yeah, that'd
February of
be
some
great.
year, sure. Didn't say yes, absolutely.
February.
No. Now, they are doing some work around cleaning up the account creation process, and I don't know if it's out there yet, but for SharePoint, having the guest access code, like we do with Exchange message encryption, so at least not have to register for an account, having a guest access code. I don't know if that's out yet, but I know that's something we're working on but understood, Mark.
Problem is not I don't think it's for us.
Yeah.
We sort of fight with this and
Yeah.
say it sucks and whatever. The poor end users out there have no idea what to
What
do.
an org ID or MSA is.
I have a friend whose name I won't bring up because I don't want to get him in trouble, who spends like half of his time helping people get into external access. I mean, it's not a very fun job, and they just yell at him.
Yeah. No, it's
It
getting,
doesn't work well.
it's getting better, but I
is
agree that
getting
it's still not perfect.
Mike, I think you mentioned the thing you were most looking forward to was the Skype and Teams integration.
Yes.
Can you speak a little more to the roadmap of that and kind of timelines?
Oh, boy. I can very generally. It gets really specific. The good news is Microsoft has actually published a PDF that has really specific information on it. And I actually have a copy of that I'd happy to share with you guys. I shared that in my last presentation about Teams. It mostly came down to a large subset of the PSTN integration is going to be divided up into about 2 major waves from what I saw. One of those waves is actually Q4 of this year. The other one is Q2 of next year. So by the end of Q2 next year, they're hoping to be most of the way there, is my understanding, as far as, the basic PSTN is supposed to be here at the end of this year, and then a lot of the more advanced features, the parking, the call transfers, holds, all of that stuff will trickle in over the first half of next year. It is scheduled to be due by end of July.
Yeah, I mean, we're using the calling internally already. I mean, there's a couple of gaps that you can't have external members into team meetings right now. There's no Teams app for like the Surface Hub, so a modern Windows 10 app. So some of those things aren't there, but what Mike said is accurate. And I think we just went public on the voice stuff about maybe 2 weeks or so ago, very recent.
Yeah.
But we've been using it internally for voice. But yeah, I think it's still
It
targeted
hasn't been my
by
tenant yet.
June of 2018 is when the goal is to have all the Skype type features available in Teams.
Yeah, so I'll be watching that like a hawk. Feel free to watch my Twitter feed because I'll definitely be announcing each feature as it hits my tenant and talking about it. Cause
If you get more Twitter followers.
that's right, if I get more Twitter followers.
Up to 6 now, right?
I'm 9 away from beating Dave.
9.
On that same topic,
Yeah.
do you think some of the adoption of PSTN services with Skype is now being suppressed given the roadmap and how it's converging with Teams? You know, it seemed like that service was just released. I was pretty excited about it. Then I got kind of scared off once I heard the roadmap, some of the concerns underlying around Skype.
Yes, definitely. There are definitely people that are shying away from it right now because of its current state of flux. So yeah, that's happening. I don't know what to say about that. I've been on the Skype PSTN. I joined as a beta member in the preview, and it is wonderful, and I use it as it's now my office line.
Yeah, I do the same too, but
yeah.
My concern is, you know, it wouldn't be uncommon for Microsoft to start to wind that down before the replacement is fully.
Get out of here.
I'm pretty confident that that's not going to happen.
Yeah, actually, initially when we announced at Ignite, we announced it was going to be a hard cutover, and then they backed off of that. And there's actually a public page that talks about the Skype and Teams transition. And the latest thing I saw, because I had to look at it with the customer last week, was that we're not going to force any hard cutover from Skype to Teams, even when we get to feature parity next year. But we won't be investing any further in Skype. We'll be investing in Teams, but Teams will be using the underlying Skype framework for a lot of things. Teams was built by the Skype organization. It wasn't another group in Microsoft. The Skype team built Teams. So it's the same engineering group that built both services. They just couldn't put all the Teams features into the Skype client. They had to modernize the underlying infrastructure.
And my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, Chris, but my understanding is that in the future there's going to be a Teams administration dashboard coming out, and that is going to give you controls for routing of your PSTN calls, whether you want it to go to Skype or to Teams. That's the vision of the future.
Yeah, what they're doing, just like how SharePoint's getting a new modern admin center that we showed at Ignite, Skype's admin center is really dated as well. So when they're refreshing the Skype admin center, it's going to be the Skype and Teams admin center as one integrated experience, and you'll be able to pick on a per user basis, whether they're using Teams for voice and conferencing or Skype, as well as the interop capability for things like instant messaging and presence. So that will be a brand new admin center that is both of them together. Because it is the same engineering work.
Any ETA on that?
Sorry. So I don't know. I don't know, but I was able to.
February of some year.
But I was able to show the I was able to show the mock-ups of it to customers publicly without NDA. So the fact that they allowed me to show the admin center without requiring a secret handshake was good.
Yeah.
So typically when we announce things like that, again, this isn't a hard commitment, but it's usually they try to do things within 6-month windows. They don't like to announce and show things and then say it's years away. So typically, we've seen this with the SharePoint team. They like to announce things at Ignite or the spring events and then have it generally available, or at least in first release within 6 months. So I'm hopeful within the next half, so sometime by June, I think. But again, that's not a hard commitment because I can't make those.
Everything you say is that's it.
I know the badge has great power.
It comes great responsibility.
On a related topic, what's the current ETA on the new SharePoint console?
The SharePoint, it's in public. Well, it's in a private preview right now, so customers can opt into it. Again, I think that's coming in the first half.
Yeah, the private preview is really bare bones.
Yeah,
I
it's
mean, you can't
basic.
do much of anything. It's pretty.
Yeah.
And it has some pretty good bugs too. So
Yeah.
they're working on it. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm in that group that talks about.
Are we allowed to talk about the fact that we know that exists?
But we showed it at Ignite.
All right.
Yeah, they should.
Yeah, the thing is, I mean, the nice thing with it is it lets you see modern team sites and comm sites there and have some filters, but for the most part, they still then redirect you to other admin centers.
Yes.
It's pretty
Yeah.
limited and
Yes.
beyond a reporting tool.
There's a big list.
Yeah.
I can tell this story. There's a huge, so in the admin center, the underlying thing is a
Oh, yeah.
modern
Oh, yeah,
list,
the SharePoint list,
basically.
yeah.
And the
Yeah.
list's name, I can't tell you the whole thing
Yeah.
because I don't remember, but it
Yeah.
starts with,
Don't
do
delete
not
me."
delete something, something,
Yeah.
something.
Yeah, yeah.
It's really
Yeah.
funny.
Yeah, I do remember that.
That's awesome. Arthur.
Can I ask a low-level question? Sorry that we're up in the ether. But I have a deployment where people inside the organization, when sending email to other people inside the organization, have their emails automatically go to spam.
Oh, I have that problem too. Do we know the answer?
Now, I was told at one point that if you're using a phone and you're not using the Outlook app, but just the native app, then the native app on the phone is not deemed to be secure or appropriate, things will go to spam. But I just got a message last night from one of the users, said, oh, the people who work for me send me email, it's always in my spam account. Is there a way, it's within the same domain that's in Office 365. Is there some way to whitelist your own domain?
No, because your own domain is automatically whitelisted.
Yeah, so-
So I would check the domain settings on that. There's a verify domain
Yeah,
tool within there. Make sure that that's giving you all green lights and double check the SPF record. It's the SPF record that I've seen is frequently at fault for flagging things as spam if it's not present or
No, I
if they're
think they
doing
were set up
multiple
by
exchange
actually-
organizations.
Went on with the support tech,
Yeah.
yeah, SPF is what it's supposed to be.
It is.
It never uses an Exchange Online, you're not in a hybrid environment?
No, it's a nonprofit, maybe they're not paying enough money every month. You know.
No, we give it to nonprofits, so it's not a matter of paying.
That's right, no, I'm just,
I know he is, I know he is.
no, I'm actually making them pay. They're not at the free service. But it's just very annoying that it has to make sure he looks at spam to find out the other people in his own organization.
Yeah.
are sending the bill.
So what you can do to troubleshoot that is analyze the message header.
Yeah.
Microsoft actually developed a fantastic plugin for Outlook called the Message Header Analyzer, MHA. You can download that and click on that it adds a button to your ribbon. And basically all it does is it takes the message header information and it kind of reformats it in a nice, pretty format. It doesn't really do anything other than that, except it makes all that XML code readable.
Yeah.
And if you look in the details of the spam scoring system, you can see a lot of details as to why it's causing it. I'll warn you right now, it's insanely technical. If you're going to be running into stuff like that, but it gives you at least a direction to start going.
Yeah.
Interesting.
A really dumb suggestion, maybe these people have rules that are putting stuff into spam.
No, they don't know how to do that.
Well,
That
but that actually
accidentally
could
on
be it,
purpose,
you know, they
that's
put their
what-
elbow on the keyboard and it
Yeah,
created
that's
a
true.
rule.
Yeah.
I would check that.
I worked at a client recently where they configured their third-party spam filter to block emails from their own domain name. That was an interesting one.
Like the other thing I'm thinking about is if they're on their clients, if someone thinks it's spoofing, something, you know, I don't know,
Yeah.
just based on how they've set up the mail, if it's only happening for the mobile clients, if somehow we think that
Is
they're
it only
spoofing the
mobile?
domain.
Yeah. Is it only for mobile clients that that's happening?
I don't know, I asked them, I didn't get the response back yet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I definitely look at the
Yeah.
trace.
Yeah.
And I have one other low-level question. I have an office, to avoid the server, we just have everybody Office 365, and then they have OneDrive, so they're synced down to the local computers. User A puts a file in the team site. User B doesn't get to see the file for a long time. How long should it take to synchronize between different computers? I thought it would be fairly fast, but, and there may have been a problem at one time, just,
Does everybody have the latest, an up-to-date version of the sync client?
yeah, the latest one.
Okay, because the older ones could take weeks.
Oh, the Groove
When it
client,
was
yeah.
bad, yeah.
the Groove client.
I can make sure, I mean, they only went online in September, I mean,
Yeah.
they're a new client, new company.
Yeah, but sometimes they might have still had deployed the old client if they're on like Windows
Yeah,
7
it's
or
actually,
something.
it's sort of
Yeah.
hard to get rid of the old one if you've had it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
I
Groove
was
is
gonna
very
say
Or,
that.
difficult to get rid of.
even the newer sync client could be stuck at an older
Mhm.
version.
Yeah.
So that one thing to look at.
Um,
It should happen very quickly.
Yeah.
And we
All-
share stuff all the time and it usually gets there before we can tell each other when it's
Okay. I
going.
mean, that's what I advertised too, that's
Yeah.
why I said you can all work in the same office, and then they
Yeah.
called, they said, we have to
I would also say,
carry it over.
you mentioned that you brought that client on right around September.
Yeah.
That's right when Microsoft released the Fall Creators Update for Windows 10, and that Fall Creators Update enabled files on demand
Right.
within OneDrive, which is a major upgrade to the client. So one of the things you could check is, A, do the machines have the Fall Creators Update for Windows 10? And B, do they have the newest version of the OneDrive client that was released after that?
Mhm.
you need both of those two components
Okay.
in order to get files on demand.
So I can just go out and get the latest OneDrive
Yeah.
and superimpose it on it.
Well,
No,
check
no, you have to
Hans-
check,
check
you have to
Hans
check for that
Brender's
other
blog.
one first, because the latest version is different. So there's two latest versions. There's the latest version if you have the Fall Creators Update, and then there's the latest version if you don't have the Fall Creators Update.
so you need to know what you're looking at, and you probably want to pull out the old one before you put in the new one. I don't know that you need to do that, but I needed to do that when I upgraded. It wasn't.
Yeah.
It wasn't like I tried to
have to
put it
do
up
that.
and everything got screwed up, and then you had to rip it all out, reboot about 800 times, and then put the new one on, and everything started working.
So uninstall the old one and
I would.
Yeah.
I don't know that you have to, but I would.
that won't mess up the sync that you already have.
Well,
It's already messed up.
it's already messed up. Yeah, you're gonna have to resync.
You have to resync.
Yeah.
I'm here for peanut gallery.
Although make sure that
Responses
anything
for
they
sync.
put in there is synced. Make sure you're all green before
Yeah.
you uninstall, or you're gonna lose stuff.
Backup copy of it, yeah.
It's a little scary.
Yeah,
So the Groove and OneDrive clients actually store to a different file path on the local machine as well. And that
That was
makes
the thing
that story very painful.
Yeah.
As well, because Groove stores it to a subfolder named SharePoint, and OneDrive stores it to a new folder named after the name of the company that your tenant is registered as. Which is actually, it's a really nice feature because in the new tenant, you can actually subscribe to multiple other tenants,
That's very nice.
which is fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, I have
Or-
4 different accounts that are synchronizing files down onto my
Yeah, and you can get your
machine.
private too
awesome.
as well. So you're like, you're basically your Explorer is just like tenant, tenant, tenant.
Yeah.
If you have multiple tenants plus your personal, up, you know, that it's very nice if you have multiple tenants you're working with.
Yeah.
Still very confusing for those poor damn users.
Yes,
Yes, it is. Okay.
that is true.
Valid.
I remember a couple of weeks ago reading a blog post from SharePoint 25/7 and it talked about a couple of new apps like the Microsoft invoicing, but it was a little confusing. Is that available on the E5 tenant or is that only on the, will it be
The-
available on the
That
E5
is
tenant?
business only at this time.
Yeah, but E5 is business.
No,
That's
it's
what
not.
I'm
Enterprise.
saying.
E5 is enterprise. That's
Business
what
is
the
meant
E
for more
for.
small business.
Enterprises don't do business.
Yeah, well, I'm
Yeah,
small
enterprises
business,
don't
but
do
I have
business in the
E5.
Microsoft
Oh, I understand,
Yeah,
but
but
that's
you
kind of how they
don't.
think about
That's
it,
why
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Will it be coming to E5?
I mean, we've added other things to E5, to the enterprise subscriptions, like forms and stuff, so.
Yeah, I don't know about that one specifically, but a lot of times, if you go through the blog post where they announce that feature, a lot of times in the footnotes, they'll say whether or
This
not
one
it's,
didn't.
this one didn't,
No.
then either no, or they haven't decided yet.
Yeah.
Question on calendars and modern sites. Why do they suck so bad?
That's you, dude.
That's all you,
So the scenario, this is actually me, not someone online.
Oh! He's just looking down at the screen, pretending.
Cheater.
Cheater,
cheater.
Just created a new modern communication site, and we want to use the calendaring, and there's the events widget, and we add an event, but you can't do recurring anymore. And there's one other feature that was missing. But then if you go to the list in the back end, the actual list is a normal calendar list where you can do recurring. If you do it there, then it doesn't show up in the events widget. So I can't use it the way it is.
I covered this earlier. It's everything comes out half baked.
Yeah,
Right?
this one's
Yeah.
not.
And
This is like cookie dough ice cream. The stuff that's not baked is
There's
actually
actually-
still very cold.
There's
Yeah,
a
but
really
cookie
good
dough ice
reason
cream
for
tastes
it.
good. The nuggets are the best part. but this is not-
That events widget is, it's trivial at best. I mean, it's really for we're having 3 company parties this year.
Yeah, but I
You
can
know?
give you the root cause analysis on that. The reason that your reoccurring is gone or whatever is because half of the calendaring stuff is not exist in the REST services. They're still SOAP services. So they're not going to build a modern web part against SOAP services.
Is there a workaround to get your calendar, if you're just using the SharePoint calendar end of it, is there a way to get that into a modern page?
SharePoint framework.
So, write code.
You can take them to the classic view of that calendar.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing now. I have a link. modern page with all the information, click the link to go to the classic view.
I found
You could do a
that
shared
quick links
mailbox.
is the #1 web part that I use in modern sites
Right.
to take you to places you're not supposed to
Mm.
go.
Right. Okay.
Because that's
That's
where
what I'm
you
saying,
see
too.
the functionality, right?
Other than that, you could try using a shared mailbox and then create a flow that creates one for mirroring.
Thought about that. Start duplicating data everywhere.
Yeah,
Yes.
Why not?
it's the right way to go, right?
Can we leverage SkySync for that? Does
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
So you're saying the modern page design pretty much relies on the REST to get data?
The modern web parts,
The modern
which
web
all were built with SharePoint Framework, because it's first and third party, right? They're definitely not going to build a modern, they being the product team, is not gonna build a modern SharePoint Framework solution and make calls against the SOAP services. Because they're deprecated.
And
That- I mean,
that's,
it just
that's
wouldn't make
actually a
sense.
very good thing, because that means if there's something that they can't do, they have to build the REST service, which we then get to use.
Do you have
So
a
it's
user
sort
voice
of
about that,
backwards
though?
good about it.
Do we have a user voice or just your blog?
Yeah, there's a user voice about, recurring events are a real problem from a REST perspective. There's still is no way to expand them.
No, I just meant all our missing restaurants.
All of the missing, yeah, I have a blog post that's got, I've asked people to to add to the list of things that they want in REST that's not there, and that calendar's got it's got a chunk of things. Which is not the answer to your question, but it's, like Julie says, it's sort of why things suck the way they do.
We definitely vote that stuff up because the way they build stuff is things we want to build, fixing things that are broken, and then user voice.
Yeah.
Not necessarily in that order. And they engineer now really in the call semesters, so they're typically looking at 3 to 4 month windows of engineering resources. And again, a big chunk of things I've seen them do is in parentheses, say the number of votes on user voice as a reason why they build things, or in some cases why they cancel things. Like some of the stuff we want to do with groups, with managers all getting groups, we killed
Yeah.
that because people disliked the idea when we announced it.
Mm.
User voice killed
Well,
it.
that's why we keep saying to everybody, go to user voice. It's
Yeah.
not just go to user voice and see if there's something
Yeah.
that you want. It's vote, vote, vote.
Vote, seriously.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Vote with every account you have.
Yep.
That doesn't
Fake
really
email.
work all that well.
Make
You can
fake
use whatever
email
accounts you
addresses.
Tell
want.
your
Keep going.
friends, put it on Twitter, put it on Mark's blog.
No, but seriously,
Seriously.
if we can push out the things that we
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
think matter, then these guys listen.
Seriously, I mean, they do. It's a big change from in the
Yeah,
past.
Vesa.
And look for
Vesa
somebody else
is-
who's already created
And when in
that
doubt,
thing.
ask
Don't
Vesa.
create a new
Yeah.
one, and,
Right.
you know.
So search it, and I
So we
would
get-
echo and support the user voice.
Yeah.
I always advocate user voice, especially when talking about Sway, which by the way, I
Yeah.
love Sway. PowerPoint's evil. Even though, yes, it's the same company, but.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a
But,
different way.
But with Sway, the user voice definitely does work with Sway because a lot of the features that weren't there before are there because of what's been suggested in Sway. Because it prioritizes what the features the Microsoft developers need to look on.
Yeah.
That's how I look at it.
Yeah.
Yeah, great.
I think that there's an important message about user voice, though, that I shouldn't have to say. But be a good citizen in user voice. You know, there's just a lot of crap in there.
Yeah.
Bad suggestions that are worded in such a way that you can't figure out what they are. These guys,
Duplicate.
I'm gonna just
Yeah,
gonna
I
keep-
agree with you. Thank you.
Nobody cleans that stuff out,
Yeah.
so it's just this big pile of poo.
Yeah.
So that's part of the reason why, if there's something good in there and we want to get people to vote on it, you know, ask anyone who will do it, I'll do it, to help sort of promote it and get votes for it, because there's just too much there for these guys to
Don't
look at.
repost it if it already exists. Make an effort to go look and see if it exists already.
Ask
Because
around a
then
little.
you're distributing your
Yeah,
votes
exactly.
over the same feature in 20 different
Yeah, don't
statements.
duplicate.
There were something like 27 different big ones about the 5,000 item limit.
Mhm.
And so they didn't see that as
Oh,
something that people wanted, because there were too many things with not enough votes.
Right.
So I sort of pointed out that they all belong together.
Yeah.
And then you've got, 8,000 votes or something.
And I'd just like to add with the user voice, even use it as a combination with the Microsoft tech community for that particular product. Yeah, it's not the crowdsourcing, obviously, with user voice, but a lot of the stuff you might be looking for might also be in the tech community. At least that's my
Mm-hmm.
twist on it.
Yeah, good point.
And if you do post something or find something that's interesting, you can tweet the user group at Boss365, and we will also retweet that as well.
That's a good idea.
We're big fans of user voice, and we try to share as much as we can, but
Yeah.
we don't have time to read all the user voices. So as you guys come across stuff, share it with us.
You don't read them all?
We have a lot of clients that they're first moving into Office 365 or just upgrading to SharePoint 2016 or Office 2016. And a lot of times we're being asked for recommendations for end user training courses. There's a lot out there. Do you have any recommendations for what you've seen work well before?
I mean, start with the Fast Track website. There's a productivity library, which one thing I like about it is they've taken, there's a view by product, so you can look at just SharePoint or OneDrive, what have you. But business people don't wake up in the morning typically and say, how do I use SharePoint or Teams better? It's how do I do something better in finance or HR? So they've actually put lenses on, like there's like 270 different scenario cards. You can filter by industry and say, show me things in healthcare or finance, financial services, or you can filter by role and say, show me things by a finance department or a sales department, and then it gives you quick little videos with little cards for training. So I've been pointing people a lot at the Fast Track library, and then obviously we've had partners like Brainstorm that are great, and then we have obviously LinkedIn that we bought that has had LinkedIn Learning, the lynda.com stuff that, as Mike was showing, we're starting to build into the product as well. So those are kind of my top three.
I think it's always got to be in the context of what people are doing, but that's too generic to me. It's not that it couldn't be helpful, but you know how HR works in a theoretical way is not usually how HR works. So I think by doing small pilots and getting get people up to speed, have them sort of be the champions and sort of do the viral thing. But most importantly is build something people want. Right? Most often we don't build something people want, so they're dragged into it. Then we have to focus on adoption, which is the wrong way to go. So if you give them something they want, they'll learn it. It's not a problem. And if these guys are doing their job right, there shouldn't have to be a lot of training. That UI ought to make sense, and they're doing a much better job than they used to. But if you can get people inside the organization to be teaching each other how to do it, that's the winner. Because then you build a support structure that lasts too. I think that there is some good third-party training out there, but nobody can keep it up to date. It's just, I would not want to be in that business right now. That would not be fun.
I've seen too in some organizations. Obviously, I've seen Brainstorm, and that's pretty good because it gives you in context. How do I do things? And it's pretty good videos. But kind of going old school and doing office hours. I've seen work in some organizations. Just between 11 and 1, a couple of quote unquote experts are going to be in the cafeteria. Bring your laptop, ask questions, and that goes pretty well. Because a lot of folks they don't quite know what they want to ask, but they know they have a question, and be able to kind of show that seems to work. It doesn't scale for huge global organizations, but if you have pockets of area, you kind of need that extra help. And then to Mark's point, if you can build up that community where they're training each other, you're golden. Self-supporting.
Sue Hanley always builds. It used to be a site collection. Now it'd be a modern site that has all of the material that explains how the organization itself is using platform. And so that's a place you can send people. That's tough to keep up to date too, though, because it's not just that the platform changes, it's also the way you use the platform changes. So if you build that by having Sue come in and then it's all great and everything and there's a bow on it and you pay her bill and she leaves, then you got this another pile of poo that isn't going to be any good unless somebody's working it. Right? So it's got to be an ongoing thing, which is why that support network is such a good idea. Because then people start to, tend that.
Or you have somebody that curates it.
Right. Right. It's something that has to be ongoing, though.
Yeah, it's sort of a size of the organization situation.
If you don't have people internally who pay attention to this stuff, you're going to fail.
And make sure people are looking at the usage and adoption, the content pack we have. It's a good source of finding people and departments that are using it, and to Mark's point, promoting them if they're not out there as user champions and advocates, and whether you have a newsletter or a forum or whatever, that you start to do like what Microsoft does, use them as an internal case study. I mean, that's how we sell to you all. You ask for examples and case studies, and we get Shire and others to speak publicly, and then you say, oh, great, I'm going to follow the Shire pattern. You can do the same thing internally with your user champions.
Users are used to working offline. flights, traveling, all this stuff, international companies, Slack works, well, Slack you can access offline, read all your chats, catch up on things. Trello you can access offline. That story in Office 365 isn't there. Teams you can't get to offline, Planner doesn't exist offline. What would you suggest to a client like this that needs kind of a better offline story in the O365 space?
Wait.
What?
Wait.
It's not really a problem like it used to be.
Right.
I mean, think about it. It used to be a nightmare. Now you can get on an airplane and work the whole time.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah,
that
there's
you
Wi-Fi
want to,
on
but yeah,
planes.
you can.
It's not a
Right.
problem.
Outlook.
I think a lot of the tool. I mean, if you're doing document-based work, you're fine, right? Because you can sync
Right.
everything with OneDrive. I think
Yeah.
that's the road warrior success story is OneDrive.
Mhm.
If you're working with Planner, you're right. You're sort of stuck.
I gotta think that's coming though, right? I gotta think that offline's coming and is part of the roadmap for teams.
Yeah, but
Given all the
if you
investment
think about it,
areas.
you
There's
know,
not much of a roadmap for
updating
it.
a plan while you're on an airplane, do you have to do that? You know, I mean,
Yeah, the
it's
specific-
not the actual work,
No,
that's
but-
managing the
The
work,
specific
right?
use
The
cases,
conversations.
they're like at the airport and they're just, because they're super busy, they're consultants
Yeah.
as well, they get assigned something, they're heading onto the airplane. They may get the alert on their phone, but then they don't have the access to see it. and
Have
do
their
anything with
company
it for a
build
couple hours.
actionable messages.
Or you can use the Planner app on your phone.
I was just gonna say that too.
Oh, but you're still offline.
No, I know, but when you get
Right.
on the plane, you wait until you get to flight and
Yeah.
you connect to the
Sure.
Google Wi-Fi.
But you're gonna have the big thing though is besides Planner, it's conversations, right? I mean, that's kind of the win there is if people are moving into teams and that's how people are communicating and working, you want to be able to read or catch up on the day's events, you know, when you're offline. So I gotta think that, I think you did not, it's in the roadmap.
Yeah, I mean,
It's
we're
gotta
doing,
be.
we're doing it with Outlook,
I
we're doing it
mean-
with OneDrive. The challenge with offline is, as you all know, is the sync and the conflicts when things are offline, and that's been a problem since Access, Lotus Notes, a bunch of things.
And OneDrive took how long
Since
for the
paper.
sync to get
Replication
fixed? So,
conflicts.
It's paper.
some lessons learned.
Stone tablets.
Oh, you remember those?
I do.
And with the offline support, that is like, speaking of user voice, I believe that's number 2 of, it's got more, it's probably now close to 2,000 votes for Sway that's been out there. And of course, that's not
That's
still
enough
there
right
yet,
now,
but
yeah.
for the same reasons,
Yeah,
that's what we
yeah.
did say.
Yeah, I mean, when we take for granted just bandwidth being available here, there are other parts of the world that don't have the
Yeah.
fortune that we do with the bandwidth,
Yeah.
and we're sensitive to that as well with a lot of other countries as well. Even parts of the United States that don't have,
Yeah.
great cellular or Wi-Fi coverage.
Most of them are better than our bandwidth.
I think you also have to get, for anything like this, you want to get down to the use cases. I mean, you just gave some, so I'm not picking on you, David, but,
Bring it on.
people say, oh, everything has to be responsive. Why? What does that really mean?
Right.
Is that really the case? The answer is no. The same thing with the offline story. What do you really need to be offline? And if not, if it can't be offline, what does it feel like? How do you deal with that particular issue? And maybe that means you go to email and you write an email to tell somebody to update Planner, and it goes off when you're off the airplane.
Mhm. Right.
It's not the ideal situation, but for the times that actually happens, there are stopgaps, and that might be good enough.
I just want to mention why I have to be offline, because people say, oh, I can do this on Slack with no problem.
Right.
But this,
Well, they can read stuff in Slack, but they still can't talk to anybody when they're in a cave, right? So, again, it's what do they actually want to accomplish? Which thing that they do in Slack do they want? And then how can we attack that thing? When someone says, oh, I can do everything offline in Slack, I say, what? Right? I agree with you. You can do a bunch of stuff offline in Slack, and that's cool. But which thing is keeping you from getting your job done? And it can't be the thing where you can't talk to your friends about what you're doing this weekend, which is sometimes, when you drill into it, sometimes it's the wrong thing, right?
I think if you're having that discussion with the client though, a lot of the time their mindset is, well, I'll just do it Slack.
Yeah. Agreed.
I have one from
And then you
online.
remind them that they own Teams and why
Is there
people
really
Slack when you own
someone
Teams.
Yeah.
Right now, I'm just going Twitter for the SP Health
Okay.
hashtag. Anyone have a strongly recommended conference room scheduling solution for Exchange Online that they love? Sorry, that's his question.
I did. No.
Um,
Conferencing sucks.
Microsoft Flow, SDLC around that. what are the options around a real life or close to
Logic
real life?
apps.
No.
Logic
Not, well,
apps.
remember that Flow itself is more of a power user tool, and you're not writing code, so there's no S to D, right?
Well, you're sort of
Right.
writing code if
Fine,
you
an
consider semicolons.
FLC, flow lifecycle.
Right.
There's no
Well,
software,
you do get some
Different
versioning,
environments.
right? And you get a little bit of instrumentation. It's not great, but you get some. But I think you're right. If you want to
Logic
actually
apps.
have software development lifecycle, you write software, which would be a logic app.
Yeah, I know we're doing some packaging with Power Apps now, right? We're doing environments as well. So to Mark's point, we're not saying it's a full development tool, but there are some times where you want to do something in a test environment and then make sure you don't break somebody else and have the ability to promote it. So I know they are working on some tooling, so having environments was the first thing.
Right.
Then having the ability to do some packaging, especially with Power Apps, was the second thing. And
Talking
then
Power Apps or Flow now?
well,
I got
Flow, but I'm
confused.
just saying.
Oh,
it's the
okay,
same-
all right.
no, no,
I'm
just
like,
saying-
did I
No,
misunderstand
no, I'm
the
saying,
question?
so just, so.
I said Logic
Yeah,
apps.
no, no, no,
That's
no.
not Power
No,
Apps.
so Power Apps, Flow, and Power BI are all owned by the same team.
Oh, okay.
And Flow is built on top of Logic Apps.
Right.
So it's owned by the same engineering org, which is actually the Azure division. So the fact that they're thinking about business developed apps, Power BI, Power Apps, and Flow in the common data service, and they're thinking about things like environments and regions. But again, Flow is just built on top of Logic Apps.
I was actually looking at the export capability in Flow. This is sort of wacko. I was thinking about writing a flow to do exports of other flows and put them into source control. I couldn't get the export to work, so that didn't get too exciting for me. But
Wait a day.
It just wouldn't work. It just, like, the page wouldn't load.
Wait a day.
Ah.
Try tomorrow.
I did do it the next day, and it still hung.
Still
So
hung.
it wasn't
Different
working.
browser?
But it was an interesting idea because there are some flow actions that are about flows.
And
And if you
that's
haven't
actually
found
exactly the problem that having right at this moment. I've got a SharePoint list, I've got a
Yeah.
flow going off, Power Apps trying to go. Anyway, my key problem was how can I get one flow to be triggered by another flow?
HTTP
These
request.
darn triggered
Yeah.
things, and sorry, what?
HTTP request?
Yeah.
you set it up as an endpoint, and then you can.
Yeah. Why not?
All right.
It does
I
work.
was looking into that and I went,
No?
all right.
Yes.
I may have got my,
It does work.
thank you, but that might answer.
It can make your brain hurt for sure,
It-
absolutely. But I think the technology will work. It's a question of can you get the sort of back and forth, and it's
Do
like
they
work-
both need to be flows? Sorry.
Yeah.
it's sort of like working with promises in JavaScript. You know, you have to sort of get your head around the sequencing and chaining and all that nonsense,
Yeah.
and make things happen in the right order. I think having flows call other flows,
Yeah.
especially if you want something to come back, gets sort of the same way. Yeah.
I had recursive flow happen.
Yeah.
I went, oh, no.
Yeah.
That
Yeah, you need, okay, to your point, you need to make the call and then you have to put in a wait.
Wait, see, that's fine. Thank
But
you.
there's no sort of asynchronous, like you make an HTTP call from a flow.
So you can make an HTTP call from a flow to one that has a flow thing, and then the last thing in that flow is a response.
Right.
And then that response goes back to the other flow. So
And
it
then-
makes
and
a
the first
synchronous
flow will
thing.
wait.
Yeah, because you put in a wait.
Oh,
for-
wait for.
So wait for
Yeah,
the
yeah,
flow
yeah,
to
got
finish,
it.
yeah.
Right.
Oh, but that is a scary paradigm. So if you can, I would keep handing off. Do you know what I mean?
I just recently tried to write a flow to replace a bunch of JavaScript that I have people running in a page, because it just seemed to make sense. Like, we only want to do this once a day. Why do we force them to go to a page and do this? It just it got so convoluted and so complex, and I had flows running for 16 minutes, and and they weren't really, I mean, it's not that complicated,
but
it's a bunch of I/O and stuff. And so I actually reverted back to doing it in JavaScript just because I could control the logic better. So there you would be a logic app.
I would
right?
pause on that idea, and that's not where I would go. If I were going to do that scenario, I would take that JavaScript, I would create a flow maybe to trigger it, but in general, what you really want there is an Azure function. So
Right.
you make an Azure function that runs JavaScript, that has an HTTP trigger, so then from your you know, you can do a timer job or
This
whatever.
is my favorite client where I will never see
Yeah,
Azure.
no, I know, and that's the.
Nor do I see installing anything on my laptop. So, you know,
What do you run Visual Studio Code through like a?
a portable version of Visual Studio
To
Code
do is
because it's
develop.
better than Notepad.
That sounds wonderful. That sounds
so
wonderful when you're building by the hour.
Flow and bring it up,
So
Yeah.
just decouple it, and it's work fine.
They found out I was using Flow and they said, that's not authorized. You can't do that. It's like, well, let's turn it off then.
Jeez.
You've got business processes running in it now.
Yeah, it's in your tenant.
But yeah, I mean, it's, I think that what I've seen about with Flow, I've tried to use it at various points over the last maybe year and a half, and the first couple things were just total messes. Forget it, it's not going to work. And then it's like, oh, I actually got something done, and then oh, I got something more complicated done. Now it's like, oh, I could do something incredibly complicated. The question is whether I want to. So, you know, at some point, I want to be able to graduate to Julie's way of doing it, probably by handing it to her, because she's good at that stuff.
He's delegating,
But if you
yeah.
can get into Azure, I think that's often going to be the right answer, because you can have more sophisticated logic than you could build with blocks.
Yeah, and you have a little bit more of, to go back to the SDLC. You know, even with Azure Functions, which doesn't, you can just do them right in the browser, and it's quick and dirty, and it's fine. But you can also do them in Visual Studio and deploy them, and you can get a full blown. Yeah, and they're cheap, so it's kind of nice.
Another one from the Twitter sphere.
We got a real
Go
question.
on,
Oh,
Roger.
sorry,
Live
sorry
one.
about that. Sorry, my MC isn't working.
Come on.
Staying on the topic of flow, how do you find it best to organize service accounts?
Can I bring up the thing I
Same
said?
client just asked me today, why are all the emails coming from you?
Yeah, why is everything running to Mark?
This
That's
is
how
a
it
really
works.
bad story, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I agree.
If we were on-prem, back in the good old days of on-prem, what would we have done? We would have built a service account, and we would have put that service account in Exchange, and that our service account would have run everything, and we wouldn't have had to pay an extra license fee. And the same scenario does not exist in Office 365, and I think it's a real problem. I don't know that I necessarily want to demand that it's free, but they definitely need to have this account that is a service account that can be granted certain rights into all the apps, but is not a user. And that, you know, and so I've done it with a user and paid the fee for the user for a particular app, but that doesn't scale well.
That's the
Yeah,
best.
it just
one.
doesn't scale.
It all gets really complicated if you start to run scenarios, though. We talked to Marwan and
Yeah. Who's he?
the other guy.
Can't think of his name. No.
Karam.
Karam.
Do you know him?
The two of the guys who sort of run that stuff. And we talked to them about this, and they were nodding and sort of smiling, and they didn't disagree with us. But I think when you start to run through the security scenarios, right? So you set up a flow, you set up a service account to run the flows that do stuff in HR. Great, no problem. Now, do you use that same flow service account to run the flows in finance?
No.
Ooh, well, maybe not. So, but wait a minute. We've got two flows in HR, and one of them is sort of different than the others, and one's looking at paycheck stuff, and so it just like now you have like 300 different service accounts because you've got different security boundaries. So it gets complicated pretty fast.
And you're paying full-blown licenses
yeah,
for
right.
every single one.
And you would end up with a license.
Yeah.
But the flows are executing in the pool.
It depends on what that flow does.
Right.
Yeah, well, I know.
Because the flow needs access to.
Yeah, you've got to have an account so that you can say you can have access to the SharePoint
No, I get
list.
that.
You
Yeah.
can-
Assuming it's stored in
Probably.
Yeah, because all you need is that account to be able to have the connections. Right.
And honestly, I think something to that effect would be the solution if Microsoft could come up with some sort of, say, a service account license. Something like that.
Yeah.
And I
That
would
they
say
sell
from
in
a
packs of
security.
like 50 or 100 or something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
Well, they shouldn't have to
Or-
sell
or
them
each-
because
I was gonna
mean,
say,
it's-
you could
you
even
can't
just-
get things to happen.
It
Yeah,
could
but
even
you know they
just
don't wanna
be.
give anything
I
for
would say. I would
we
say.
get the, we
Chris
get
is
the,
gonna
I
fix
know, we
it.
get the
It
shared
could be
mailbox,
free.
mailboxes free as an example,
Yeah.
so I can
Yeah.
see why.
Yeah, they could make it free, but then to limit the abuse, make it so that,
Right.
it can't log on interactively.
Right, exactly.
Oh, sure,
Exactly.
absolutely.
Those
Oh,
types
yeah,
of-
yeah,
get
yeah,
people
yeah,
that'll
yeah.
try
Yeah,
to
no,
real
it
service
doesn't
account.
need to
Yeah,
do
like a
that.
real
Yeah.
service account.
It would have to be used
So-
in like the tenant admin
Correct. Yeah.
places or.
So that way
it doesn't get a
it
one
has
drive,
the
it doesn't
access,
get
Right.
but
storage.
you're
Yeah, exactly.
guaranteeing,
Yeah.
you know.
So you
Yeah.
don't abuse it.
And you want to
It's
give it
not
a nice
using the
name
mailbox.
like the
Do we have
HR
this on
bot
user
or
voice
something.
anywhere?
We should, right?
What's that?
Let's log
Puts
this in
user
user voice.
Yeah.
There's a way of impersonating it.
I'm
You can
just
log in
treating
as
it as
yourself
a
with your permissions and then impersonate the service account.
Well,
Yeah, but any kind of-
impersonation is a role that
No,
can be
it's not a-
granted to that account.
No, it's that, and it's like when you do any kind of on-prem development. You say to the, you're the developer or you're the whatever, and you say to your IT people, you're like, I need a service account to do this. And they give you a username and password or
Right.
whatever, and that's what you set it up under.
Right.
But, yeah.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
No, I completely agree, and it's one of the things that's really pushed me away from Flow. I'm like, I can't create a Flow or else it's gonna be in my name, and then
Right.
you're screwed, because I'm only here for 3
You have to
months.
determine your, I mean, you can have
Yeah,
share
it's,
flows.
it's a
but
consultant's
still.
nightmare.
Yeah,
And I don't want to leave people with solutions
Yeah.
that are going
Right.
to break when I'm not there.
right,
And I don't want, for them, not for me.
right.
I don't want the phone calls, but
Right.
I mostly want their stuff to work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So you need to downgrade a user account to a service account too, because if a developer leaves, you might want to just have them log in.
Well,
again.
and so the supposed solution for that is that you can have team flows, right? So I can invite you to my flow, and then the two of us own the flow, which makes the UI a little weird because you actually have to know it's a team flow to go and find it.
Yeah.
So in theory, one of us is going to leave at a time. If two of us leave at the exact same time, we're screwed. They're screwed because we're gone.
Or they can change your password and then put somebody
You
else.
just
Right.
tie.
If they know that it's there.
Group password, like
No.
groups.
No.
You can't use a group.
You cannot assign a
can't-
group.
It's all
Can't
based
assign
on
a
an
group.
individual
It's user
account.
Put it into a group like in a fake way, like this would be a way of just dropping it in.
There is
Then that's a
not.
problem.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, no, I would make sure make sure
Create
that's
a user
understood.
account.
So
It's
what
not
you
an
guys have
uncommon
on
thing.
voice, let us know.
Yeah.
It's almost like the
Not
whole
an
thing was
uncommon thing.
envisioned for the consumer market. And a lot of
Yeah.
it is, right? Because you can write flows to do all
Right.
kinds of cool things with Twitter. That's really neat. But when you get to the enterprise side of the world, it sort of falls apart, which is sort of backward for Microsoft. Usually
again,
it's really
well-
hard and impossible to use
Yeah.
first, and then it gets easier.
No, but to Jared's point, it's the MVP concept. It's get something out that's minimal viable product. And then over time, every month, every quarter, keep iterating and adding in other things like the SharePoint integration with Flow, which is coming
Yeah,
out
and
now.
to that, to Microsoft's credit, I will say they have done amazing updates and changes
Yeah.
into Flow.
Yeah. No, I
It's
agree
gotta
with
be
you, Mark.
one of the fastest moving products I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Completely
No, it's
unusable when
great.
you
No, but
started.
there definitely are some
Yeah.
things we
Right.
have to do better.
Didn't work.
If we tie it back to the
Didn't work for
SDLC
me.
question,
Yeah.
if you deploy this as an Azure Logic app, it's not tied to an individual, it's tied to your tenant.
Yeah.
And then you could reassign
Right.
and do
Right.
whatever you
That's
do.
true.
We have to pay per execution of the Logic app.
Right.
It's only a few pennies, but
Guess
it's not.
The
Yeah,
problem with the graduation being Azure is that a lot of organizations, you and I have this fight all the time,
Mhm.
a lot of organizations don't let anyone near Azure.
Right.
Yeah.
So as a consultant who comes in through the business side, for instance,
Mhm.
there's no way in hell I'm ever going to get to Azure.
Yeah.
So I have to do it some other dumb way, which forces me to do things in a way that is sort of shaky.
Yeah.
And to that point, the latest version of Visual Studio actually comes with the Logic app editor.
Yeah.
So they're starting to make that barrier a little bit.
But do you want to have the
Yeah,
permission?
but
I
you
still
still
have to
have,
deploy it.
you
That's
have
where
to
do I
deploy
deploy
it,
it?
and if you
You
don't
need a
have an
resource
account,
group or
yeah.
something. deploy that.
Assuming I want to use Visual Studio, I still can
Which he
deploy it.
does not.
Visual Notepad. in
That
your
would
case.
be one of these. Here, Visual Studio.
There's some stuff.
Do you have a question?
Yes, sir.
I think I know the answer to this one. Is an iframe embed on Word Online URL? Does it make sense?
Wait.
Does everyone else have a
Iframe
question?
Embedding a Word Online URL.
Yeah.
The best way to display a PDF in a modern web page. Basically, they want to display a PDF in a modern web page.
No, there's a
That's
preview.
what
There's a
You use
preview.
a
The
file
preview.
preview
The document
Right.
web
Reviewer.
Yeah.
Word viewer can view PDF.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, good idea.
Well, the document web
What's better
part
for this one? For Mark's guy?
shows 207. What's the number?
Yeah,
272
something.
different
Yeah,
file
something
formats,
like that.
including X-rays. What else?
Yeah,
did I say?
DICOM images.
DICOM.
Yeah.
DICOM images. Apparently, those are really important.
Yes, they are.
Yeah, hospitals there.
Yeah.
And research facilities.
Huh.
Yep.
3D
That was the biggest
X-rays.
blocker for like
Excellent.
Fox and Dropbox
Yes.
was DICOM.
I'm tired of hearing about
I
DICOM.
know.
Can you say like I don't know, like
Well, they're
comics
really
or
cool.
something interesting,
Can you
something
do
like
a CAD drawing?
Bugs Bunny
I like
animations.
that. I
or
like
something.
that all the Adobe products can preview.
Yeah, that's
Because
cool.
that's been a like
That is
in
cool. Yeah, that's
CAD,
been a pain in the neck.
CAD drawings. That's
Yeah.
Yeah.
kind of a big
Now,
one.
are you now doing that for one of your clients because now you know the answer?
No,
Right now?
this was a Twitter.
This is for a friend.
It is.
For a friend.
My friend wants to
This
know.
friend, not mine.
Any of you use CDS in real life?
Who?
What's that?
Common data service.
Good answers.
The answer is no, apparently.
And the expert panel replies with blank.
I've got a,
Yeah, that's how.
I didn't know what it was called.
I've got
Common
a
data service.
question I would like,
Well,
just,
it's
I'm kind of
the
curious.
acronyms.
So,
Hate that
So no,
acronym,
nobody.
please.
got a client, they're brand new to SharePoint, right? Brand new to SharePoint, been on Lotus Notes
Bless them.
Oh,
the past
nice.
20 years.
Yeah.
And they're
Nothing
the
you do
answer-
is going to be wrong.
The answer is binary tree.
Yeah. Shut the.
Their mailboxes have moved already.
We start talking about workflow, right? And so the question is, hey, you know, there's the 2013 workflows, but then there's also flow. Nice thing about 2013 workflows is it's tied to the site collection, so it's really, you know, it's kind of integrated. And it's sort of deprecated, but not really announced that it's deprecated. If you actually look out, there's been recent updates about SharePoint Designer workflows. It says September this year. There's some recent documentation. So I'm curious, you know, in that scenario,
You probably just got through the documentation publishing process. It takes like 6 years.
but knowing that there's such, I mean, when I look at Flow, I go, you know what, it sits outside of SharePoint, it's its own sort of independent thing. The authoring experience is it not? I don't know if I agree with that totally. But like, would you just are
It's a
you
good thing.
are you of the mind?
I said that's a good thing.
I don't know if I fully
Yeah, if
agree
I
with
was
that.
starting,
But my question I'm getting at is it like no, like don't use any of the 2013
I would use
workflows,
Flow.
turn
I
it
would use
off,
Flow.
turn
I would use
2010
Flow.
off. From a besides just the evangelism, but like the fact that there's not that feature parity, it's not.
No,
There
there
is
isn't.
the-
There isn't.
I-
It does a lot more. It may
Does a lot
not do
more.
some of the things, but it does a lot more. So I would always try Flow first and fall back to SharePoint Designer if you have to, but I don't think you're going to have to.
That's what I'm doing.
Publishing
If,
sites, so we don't do
yeah,
anything.
and when it
And-
doesn't do it, a lot of times you can go to the Logic Apps documentation and they'll tell
Yeah.
you how to do it.
Right.
I'm not even kidding.
Listen,
Like some
it's-
crazy
It's
stuff.
like little stuff like, you know, impersonation. You can't just throw an impersonation step in there.
Should you be doing that really?
You do, yeah.
Yeah, you make a connection with somebody
Yeah, you
else.
can do it.
Yeah,
Okay.
It
All
can be
right.
done.
you're actually already impersonating.
You're going to have to think about things differently.
Yeah,
so
it's a definite
that's what
mind
makes
shift.
it makes it a little harder. But I think if somebody's coming to SharePoint for the first time, I would today,
Yeah.
December 2017, I would say go modern, use Flow, use Power Apps, use all this new stuff because they don't have any baggage. When you say 2013 workflow, they have no idea what you're talking about, right? Why
Yeah,
would
when
they
it
care?
can't do it, you just say, oh, there's
Doesn't-
just really no way to do that.
Go Butters on user voice.
Well, it's funny because the other opposite is like, well, should we buy like, you know, because should we get Nintex, should we get a K2? That's
Not
just
until
more.
you
Oh.
When you
really
need it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
when you
yeah,
really need
right.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, make sure you thoroughly exhaust first-party options before.
I don't know. In my family, we like to have 12 cars more than we need because it just makes more sense because it looks nice in the yard.
I'm joining Mark's family.
Well, it's not expensive.
Can I
or-
borrow?
Kids underneath.
Should we get K2? Should we get Nintex?
Yeah, it's just
Sure.
Get them all.
Yeah.
Get one of those.
Okay, I have a little Power Apps type question.
Sweet.
Attachments are marvelous in SharePoint because you can attach the links, the documents, libraries, but Power Apps and attachments have stymied me recently.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
You can view the darn attachments in Power Apps, but you can't add it.
Right.
Please tell me, when is that going to be? How can we get that to work?
So it's funny, so David and I work together on a Power Apps and Flow workshop that we do here quite often, and that's one of the things that they're working on. Today it kind of does a little smoke and mirrors and it puts the file inside of Azure and kind of mimics the behavior. They're aware of it and it's a high priority.
Paul
Any
Colmsey.
workaround?
Paul Colmsey. Do you know him?
Yeah.
He's a guy in Australia. He's written a bunch of blog posts on
Yeah.
really insane ways to get it to work.
Yeah.
So there are a bunch of insane ways you can do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, Paul.
Yeah.
Culmsee.
Yeah, and this is going to become even more and more as you have the Power Apps design experience more tightly integrated with the SharePoint lists. The need's only going to increase
And that's coming out soon.
soon.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
we're testing it internally.
It's in first release.
Yeah.
I have a question. We are using the SharePoint 2013, and we are going to migrate eventually to the Office 365. The challenge is the 2013 out, the permission is a mess, crazy permission.
yeah.
if you migrate, what would you do? Migrate the whole thing, then you clean up the permission thing on the office, or you clean up first before you migrate?
Just
So
permissions?
my recommendation there would be to, you know, avoid the same old garbage in a shiny new garbage can scenario, and go for, use the opportunity of the migration to create a clean architecture online, and then migrate the content in a restructured fashion.
The content that makes sense to migrate.
The content that makes sense to migrate, that's correct.
Yeah, I wouldn't fix
don't have
it
to migrate
there.
everything.
I would migrate into the fixed thing.
Well,
Does that
sometimes
make
you
sense?
end up doing a little bit of both.
Well, yeah, but
Sometimes.
But as a overall thought process, take what you have that's bad, architect what is good, and then go from there to the places that it goes. What makes sense to go there?
Yep.
It's like when you move from one house to another, you know, you pack everything in a box, even the stuff you haven't looked at since the last time you moved, and then you put it in the new house.
Well, you didn't take it out of the old box,
Right,
so
and
you're
then
just
you take it to
taking
the
the
new
box
house,
with you. Yeah.
and you open up the box and you're like, why the hell did we remove this stuff, right?
Yep.
You don't want to do that. I'm going to try to avoid it.
So what do you recommend to clients to get rid of their old data? You recommend delete it, or archiving the solutions? We go in, they say, I don't want to delete it, what do you do? They don't want to remove it,
So
they don't want to delete it?
I'm a pack rat, and I tell my clients that Office 365 enables people to be pack rats. I mean, you have so much storage for the most part, and I mean, even if they have a ridiculous amount of storage, additional storage is crazy cheap if they actually manage to go over their quota. So I just move it all, but move it into a place, you know. So as they were talking about. Yeah, you can put it in a old site collection and turn off search for that site tenant, for that collection rather. You know.
The Security and Compliance Center is useful for looking at what's really old and hasn't been touched, though it has to be in Office 365 for that to happen. And some of the third-party tools, ShareGate gives you some good reporting on that.
Yeah.
But then it's conversations, you know, because I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all. You know, if it's all the contracts you've ever had with your vendors, that has a different retention idea than the meeting notes from every meeting you've ever had in your team, right? So you sort of have to think about it from classes of content based on the importance and.
It's probably got something to do with how accessible you need it to be. I mean, because Shire is archiving all of their old stuff using ShareGate's archive tool and putting it on an old NAS that they're not going to use anymore because they're going to Office 365. So they have this ginormous NAS that they're just going to dump all their archives on.
People usually feel much better if you tell them you've archived stuff, and then they never ask you for it.
Yeah, there's also the legal thing. A lot of people don't want to retain stuff longer than they need to because they have a legal requirement to produce it. So if stuff hasn't been modified or accessed in X number of years, they either leave it there, remove rights, index it, what have you. Don't just migrate a bunch of old crap over, especially again, because there's no real incentive to delete it other than legal reasons.
Honestly, with a lot of my clients, we've ended up just migrating a lot of the archived data because we can migrate it faster than we can get a decision from the client on what the hell to do with it.
Yeah, that's
So it's
probably
like,
true.
That's almost always the case.
we just
Because
put
it's
it
always
there
going to keep it. You know,
because, you know, we need to finish up this project, and what to do with this is the question that's holding
Nobody
up the
ever wants to
project.
say delete it because then
Exactly.
the person on
Exactly.
the
No,
first saying
nobody's ever going to come out and say that.
Yeah.
So
I could
we
swear
put it in a
that-
site collection. We turned off the search.
I could
on that
swear a couple
collection,
decades
and-
ago people would actually make decisions and own them. Does anyone do that anymore?
No.
It's all by committee.
I think
It
that's
is.
myth.
It is. It's crazy. I mean, yeah, sure, go ahead, delete that stuff. We don't need it.
Yeah.
So let's take two more questions. Someone that hasn't asked a question yet, preferably, but if now we can go back to people that have. So does anyone have a pressing question with Office 365 that has not asked a question yet?
Or
What's
any
on
other
fire?
on-prem too. Doesn't
Yeah, we
have
could
to-
also cover SharePoint on-prem. We have enough expertise here. And
The
Exchange
Office
on-prem is great.
365 user.
Well, I'm
Yeah.
just
Hybrid, we want
trying to
hybrid,
get some people
right?
to say things.
Hybrid.
All right, Arthur, go ahead.
Philosophical question. We have OneDrive syncing all the files on the local computers. We have to worry
It's
about
working.
backup.
I don't think so.
Backing up the local drive, you mean? The C
No.
drive?
Backing
Not
up.
a ransomware. hitting the
OneDrive?
site.
No, so it's
No.
actually cool. So one of the things that's coming out soon, we announced at Ignite, is we are having the ability to restore OneDrive back to a point in time. So if you do get attacked by ransomware or someone deletes everything, we're coming out pretty soon with the ability to restore a OneDrive either by your tenant or the user. Once they restore it within the last 30 days for that exact reason.
For 30 days, though, that's
It's
it.
30-day window, yeah. We're not
But
gonna
you
keep it
could-
forever.
But
Yeah.
syncing is not backing up.
Correct.
Yeah.
They never
It's an
have been the
image
same
of it.
thing, yeah.
Yeah, but that's
Image
not a
of all
backup.
the team site information on local machines.
Right.
Yeah,
Well,
So,
But
so I would,
so you don't need to back up the stuff that's synced on your local machine because it does live up there.
Right.
So
And can we trust it up there?
no, you
You
should
better
back
be able
that
to, I
up.
mean, it's what you're paying us for.
You should back that up.
you have a
because what
financial back.
Microsoft
We do.
does-
You have a
Financial
financial
back to
guarantee.
SLA.
What
So
Microsoft
if
does,
you lose it,
if you do
you'll give me
research
money.
on
Yeah.
does
I won't get my
Microsoft
stuff
back
back,
up
though.
your stuff, they will
We have
quickly
multiple
quickly
copies. We have multiple
redirect that
copies.
conversation to how their high availability works.
Yeah.
High availability is not backup. I don't care how much they say that it is or that you don't need backup because they have high availability. If you have a file that gets corrupted, then the fact that that corrupted file is synchronized in 5 different data centers across the US immediately doesn't help me.
The version history does.
The version history might, if it hasn't corrupted that, but if somebody deletes something and they don't realize it until 60 days later, there's all kinds of scenarios that are not covered by the existing system. So, couple of things. The first thing I do when I have a new client is extend those time periods to the outermost capabilities for the recycle bin retentions, things like that. So those are very helpful. But I also tell people, you need to back up Office 365 the same way you would if it was on-prem. There are plenty of partners that do it. There are partners that do it cloud to cloud. There are partners that do it cloud to on-prem. You can do a homegrown solution.
We
I
just
don't
print
recommend
everything
it,
out,
but
put it in the
it can
closet.
be done. So my answer to that question is yes, you do need to back it up.
You can use a flow just to kind of copy your files through like Google
Yep.
and everywhere else too. Just-
I'm sure
They
the-
love it when you
Like
do
I
that.
said, you
Sure,
could-
sure, legal likes that.
Like I said, you could do a homegrown
So we have one
solution.
more question.
That's why I'm not the expert.
Yeah, so, you were asking like, from SharePoint 2013 to Office 365 migration. So like, we have a workflow and lot of things. Will it go smoothly or we have to create again workflow and all those things in Office 365? Like how it works? Like what may be the major hurdles?
To
Like
migrate.
when I moved from SharePoint 2010 to 13, I was supposed to recreate like VGO file and then workflow and all things. So what is the experience here in Office?
So just for the sake of the recording and everything, you're asking how do workflows migrate?
Not only
Or-
like anything customization of the scripts or something that fails when you migrate from one version to other version, it doesn't work.
So what do you do when it does fail, when a customization migration
So,
fails?
like, I'm asking like, SharePoint 2013 to Office 365, this migration is easy, or it blocks something and you have to redo a lot of things, how it works?
So my answer to that, and I'll let the developers on the panel get into more in depth on this, but my general principle and philosophy on that would be the same answer that I gave before, which is architect a new solution or a cleaner solution in the new environment. Chances are a lot of the customizations that I've run into no longer need to be customizations because there are now out-of-the-box solutions for things that used to be customized. So I would embrace that wherever possible because that at least reduces the amount of customization. And other than that, you can usually find new, cleaner ways that require less customization if it does need to happen.
So that is the recreation. So you have like hundreds of subsites or something like that. Then if you do rework in migrating, that takes a lot of effort.
Yeah.
Yep, it's a lot of effort.
So, I mean, to minimize the pain, you're going to want to start looking at third party products to do that type of migration. And what you're going to find is you're going to have to do bake-offs because they've all got their little niche, but what they're good at migrating. So you're going to have to take some of your edge use cases and try to see which tool does the best for your migration. Even though the marketing says they all are the same, they're different when you actually use them. So you're going to want to test the MetaLogics, the AvePoints, the ShareGates to see which one does better. I mean, in certain scenarios, I've seen ShareGate just crush the rest of them. Other situations, I've seen MetaLogics be the only one that can move content over. So I mean, it depends on the customizations within your environment. And I would include as part of your migration of bake-off in the beginning across the different tools and see which one works best.
But there's no single answer to any of those questions you've asked, right? I mean, will the workflows migrate? Yes, unless they won't. Right? I mean, some will and some won't, but most will.
Yeah.
Most of the content will move. If you've got custom code, odds are it won't move as well. That thing that was never going to be a problem during the upgrades, that's probably a problem. But you're just going to have to go through each thing that's important to you and figure out what's the best way to do it in the future, and how do you get from where you are to where you're going to be.
Is it Rencore that has the tool?
Yeah.
So if you have code customizations, the Rencore guys have tools that can help you index your custom solutions and sort of give you a good view.
And help you modernize them.
Well, and that too. Yeah. But I was just sort of saying so that you could have visibility of, hey, all of these sites and site collections don't have any customizations. They're pretty vanilla. We can just migrate them, and this subset are ones we're going to have to pay attention to because you were saying, hundreds of sites. Well, you don't really have to look at all of them. You just have to look at the ones that have things that are not vanilla.
All the migration vendors have like ShareGates is called a pre-check. So you can run it, and it will tell you what it thinks is going to be a problem. There may be other problems, but they're the obvious things.
Okay.
And I would also say, just to add to that, practice your migrations.
Yeah.
Your migration you don't have to put all this pressure on one day, Microsoft offers these great trial tenants. Go get one.
Yeah, I do.
Get a trial tenant, migrate into the trial tenant and be like, wonder what this is going to do. Set yourself up for testing it in a position where there's absolutely no risk.
Yeah.
And that way you can just do it and do it again until it does work. And you'll see what moves, what breaks, all that fun stuff.
Like even just simple stuff, like I'm going to move all the list items from here to here, and you go to move it, and it says, oh, this user doesn't exist, so I'm going to assign the current user. Oh, I better map that old user who doesn't exist anymore to the person who actually took their job. Then I do it again. Oh, another user. Oh, a column that doesn't have a data value that doesn't make sense. So it's a lot of little stuff, and a lot of it's stuff you've done to yourself. And you just have to, it's a cleanup exercise.
Yeah.
Can be fun.
It probably won't be.
Rinse and repeat. All right.
One more final question.
Is it about Sway?
No,
okay, good.
It's a fun question because it refers to a relatively new app. Has anyone started to use or play around with Whiteboard?
Nope.
I just heard about it today.
Yeah, I've heard about it, but
Today?
I
Oh my
haven't
God,
played
it's been out, I think, a couple of weeks now.
Oh, well, everybody should be using it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I've got 50,000 users on Whiteboard.
When is version 3 of that coming out? That's going to be really good.
I'll tell you this.
Well, good thing is we're
there is a
releasing new ones every
Whiteboard
month,
app
so-
built into Skype for Business. There has been for years and years.
Yeah.
And I've been using that.
No, this
For
is
years and
the
years.
Yeah,
this
that's
is
what we're doing.
this is the replacement to even what like the Surface Hubs have.
No.
So supporting like multi-party whiteboard, whether you're on a Surface Hub or a Windows 10 device. So we've been using it a little bit. It still doesn't have everything that the built-in Whiteboard app has in the Surface Hub, but that's really the goal, is having this unified experience for if you're in multiple rooms, multiple Surface Hubs, and someone else is working at home and they're on their device, you can all be inking on the same whiteboard canvas.
Is that going to be a tile in the waffle? I mean, where does it
In
go?
the app launcher, yeah, that I don't know.
Where is it?
Where's the file
that's what I was
stored?
How do you
looking
get
for.
to
I
it?
keep
Like, if I
on
wanna go
looking on
use
my
it,
app
what-
launcher.
Yeah, where does it get
It's not
stored?
there.
I know it's in the Windows 10 App Store.
Oh, okay, so it's a
Oh, okay. And will there be integration? Because I could envision the whiteboard integration like with OneNote or even Teams, because
Yeah.
it's part of that collaboration.
So that's something that's come up, and one thing I still don't know yet is we have OneNote, we have the Wiki in Teams, we
Right.
have this now. like what the stories, I haven't looked into that yet.
It doesn't work offline.
Yeah, so when David goes underground,
Is there a user voice for it?
I'm sure there is, it's been out there for 2 weeks.
So the PDF that I was referring to about the Skype to Teams roadmap actually calls out the Skype whiteboard on that roadmap as something as a feature to be migrated. Now, how that interrelates with
Cage
this
match.
particular product, I have no idea.
Two Microsoft Teams, cage match.
So,
Not capital T teams.
All right, so let's give it a hand for our panelists.
This
They're
round
with
cage match.
slides and a raffle.
They got pretty fast.
That's
Not bad.
In the intro, I think we were yelling at each other. Gotta get rid of the recording.
Oh my god.
We sit down now?
yeah,
Yeah,
I think
you
we
can
sit
all
down.
sit.
We good?
Normal height
Thank you.
chairs?
We're done with you.
Oh, thank god.
What are you making noise for? I'm the old one.
Ah.
Hey, look, our logo. He's got our.
Oh, that's so nice.
Good work.
Yeah.
I knew.
Wow.
Very good.
Well done.
Do I take this home for your?
I'll give it to Evan. I'll put it on my door. It's my office.
Oh, wait, and I think this is Demetrius.
You did do
Oh,
yeah, for panels? Yeah, these are fun. These are fantastic. Yeah.
No, she's
I think once a year is not enough.
No.
No.
You can wear my hat.
Talk more afterwards, I don't want to get else to do. Yeah, it was a good turnout during the holidays. Yeah. Absolutely. How many MVPs were there? Yeah.
All right, so while the projector is warming back up, does anyone have any problems that you want to discuss with Office 365? All right, but more realistically, is anyone looking for workers? Anybody hiring?
I'm looking. SharePoint architect, well, PowerPoint, Power Flow, whatever.
Great. Is anyone hiring? Okay. Does anyone know of any other good events that are happening in the near future?
Christmas.
Christmas is a great one. So we have the SharePoint conference in Vegas this upcoming May. We have Ignite in September. Does anyone know of any other events happening between now and the end of the year? Chris?
So we're doing something here on January 31st. It's called the Tech Summit, which is kind of like a best of or beyond Ignite, we used to call it. There'll be 4 tracks. It's all day. It's free. You can just find that. I posted it on my Twitter feed probably earlier this week. So it's open for registration. We just opened registration like 2 days ago. So we have a session on SharePoint and Yammer, one on Power Apps and Flow, Azure, a whole bunch of other things as well.
And where do you register for that?
Just go to my Twitter feed. There's a link to a public website that we have.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so the projector is still warming up. So next month, we're still meeting the third Thursday as we always do. We're going to have a case study about a farm and intranet that Takeda has developed in the recent history. So Nicole will be joining us to present her case study at that point. So again, huge thanks to SkySync. Thanks again for coming out and sponsoring us. Without sponsorships, it really wouldn't be possible for us to have these groups. We're very grateful for Microsoft for lending us the space at no charge. We're grateful for sponsors to help supply the food, help pay the insurance, the meetup costs. A lot of little things that add up to really make a successful user group, so we definitely appreciate that. Now is a time for the raffle. So typically we would ask trivia questions at the end related to the topic that we were presenting on. We don't have that today. So
How many experts were there?
So we have 5 experts.
No, that's a trick question. They weren't all experts. Just kidding, Jared.
That is a burn.
Sorry.
So I am going to offload this responsibility to our speakers, and I will ask everyone to come up with 1 trivia question.
The Pluralsight's probably not working.
Okay?
So we have 3.
So the first 3 experts to come up with a trivia question.
You get, so we're asking the experts to ask a trivia question, and whoever gets it right gets to pick a prize. You don't get a prize for asking a question.
I got one clarify that.
Well, then why would we bother?
Does Teams work offline? Does Teams?
Absolutely.
Not yet.
The other universe.
We will count that as a question. Who answered it first?
Not yet.
Okay, raise your hands, make this easier.
Who lost at the Battle of Hastings?
We did.
Aha! Damn it, I forgot there was a credit.
Alright, we got a gift card. We never said it has to be Office 365 related.
Oh, you didn't say that.
No, I didn't say that.
I went for obscure.
It
Wasn't
counts.
obscure enough.
Mark, it counts.
It counts.
Alright.
Does David's sweater have a battery?
No. Probably. Can I change the battery?
Alright, so we spent a bit of time talking about this brand new Office 365 servers that just came out 2 weeks ago. Who can raise their hand and tell me what that is called?
Whiteboard.
Alright.
Raise the hand.
I didn't raise my hand. I have one. Okay, this is awesome. His answer is no. Who can raise their hand?
Alright, well,
I can't explain answer the question.
we'll count it. Alright, so we have one more $25 gift card left. Does any of other speakers have any trivia questions related to technology?
What's the maximum number of users who can be in a team with a capital T?
Great question.
Can I answer?
2,000?
No.
250?
No.
Ah.
Has nothing to do with Battle of Hastings.
For those that were with us last month when Mike presented on Teams, he went over this question. Mark, do we have a multiple choice?
It's a good question.
It was a very good question. Can we get a multiple choice to that question?
No, that's it. It's 2,500. I'm just giving it away. Because and you know that's how many people it takes to get something done.
Okay, last question. Raise your hands if you want to win this one. So we talked about this one online community that Microsoft has where they take opinions from users that they can vote on it. What is it called, Chrissy?
User voice.
User voice. Perfect. So those three that won the gift cards, come talk to me afterwards. I'll need your email address. We'll get that emailed over. So a few more things before we wrap up. We do have a call for speakers open. If you have anything that you would like to present, please come talk to us. This could be a case study, this could be a how-to, this could be anything in terms of building a new solution on top of Office 365. It could be SharePoint, it could be Exchange, it could be Teams. If you're piloting Whiteboard in your organization and you want to tell us how it's going, we'd love to have you. We try to vary our topics. We try not to get too technical all the time, so we do have everything from end user sessions to IT pros to light development. So if you have an interest, please come talk to us. Don't be shy. We'll coach you through the process and we'll get you up here. That being said, we also do have a call for sponsor for 2018. We are a 501c3 organization. We don't make any money on this event. Everything comes back into the company to go and operate the group. So,
I paid for the sweater myself.
So if you work for a company,
It wasn't a raffle?
so if you work for a company that does sponsor events like these, you know, software companies are very common. Consulting companies are also very common. Come talk to us. We'd love to get you onto this next slide. So that being said, we definitely want to thank all of our past sponsors. Again, it really takes a community to have these kind of groups, so we definitely appreciate them. Last but not least, we like to get a beer after these events, pay your own way, and we talk about things that we can't talk about on a live broadcast. So if you want to come join us, we're going to the Marriott Hotel, which is about 1 mile away on Middlesex Turnpike over there, or sorry, Burlington Mall Road, and they have like the restaurant there, Chopped, that we usually catch up at. So everyone, thanks for coming out. Certainly appreciate it, especially this time of year when everyone's out there doing last minute Christmas shopping. I know I should probably be doing that tonight instead of being here. So yeah, hopefully we'll see you at the Marriott in a few minutes. Thanks everyone.